The paper I present today is Slantchev's principle of convergence in wartime negotiations. And the major question Slantchev wants to address is why wars end. So one explanation is that war ends when there is an determinant or definitive victory that one side totally distracts the other, and that is the point that wars end. But if that holds, we should often see wars ending with total destruction, one side eliminating the other side. However, in reality, war often ends with negotiation settlement, and they rarely ends with total disarmament. So to provide an explanation for this puzzle, why countries often end wars with settlement instead of destruction, Slantchev raises a principle of convergence. He said that fighting is a learning process, right? Fighting is a learning process. The countries not only learn during the bargaining process before the start of the war, but also they learn the capability of their opponents during the war. And fighting is also a credible channel to review the capability of each conflicting side. Because when you fight, you run the risk of being distracted in the war, right? So if you lose in the war, it reveals that you are weak. If you win the battle, it means you are strong, right? No side can manipulate this information or bluffing. So fighting is a credible learning process. It's a credible information revealing process. And fighting is also costly so that it convinces the opponents to accept a settlement when they learn enough about their process in war, right? No, if the countries reach convergence about each other's capability, they will not continue with the war because war is costly. They would prefer to settle the war at the time they obtained enough information. And as I've said, there are two sources of information. The first source is in the bargaining process, right? The countries sit down around the table, they bargain during the negotiation, they raise their offers, and they can reject or they can reject the offer and raise another offer. However, this is a kind of manipulative informational source, right? Even if you are weak, you can give a very you can require a very high offer, right? And it doesn't cost you much. However, the other source of information is non-manipulative, non-manipulable, which is the war outcome.
A question.
Yeah.
就是即便双方都没有达到双方想要的，但是他因为如果继续战争的话会 less benefit，他也会选择就是
Yes, true.
OK
As long as their belief has converged sufficiently, and even though you might you are stronger than what your opponent believes, continuing with this war is too costly, and it doesn't worth to continue.
OK
Okay, and this is his model. Imagine there are two players, 1 and 2, they bargain over a territory worthy of pi over infinite periods, okay? And the periods start from t equals 0. And the two players bargain according to an alternating offers protocol. What does that mean? It means that in even periods, like in period 0, in period 2, 4, okay, player 1 makes an offer, and the offer is x pi minus x, which means player 1 receives x, and player 2 receives pi minus x. And in all periods, player 2 makes an offer, which is pi minus y and y and to player 1. So player 1 will receive pi minus y. And if the opponent accepts the offer, the game ends. If the offer is rejected, the player fight and the game moves on to the next period. So this is the game tree. In period 0, player 1 gives an offer, player 2 decides to accept or reject. If player 2 rejects, then there is a war. And then in the next period, player 2 gives an offer, player 1 decides whether to accept or reject, and the game continues. Okay, a very important concept is state of the world. I will explain what is state of the world later when I explain how to solve this game. But a key of his model is this military position. What is a military position? Slantchev decomposed, or he divided a war or war objective into a set of military positions. You can imagine that in a war, each country wants to achieve a set of military positions or military objectives. If it achieves all the objectives, then it means this country fully distracts its opponent and wins the war, right? And if the country lose all of those objectives, then it means this country is distracted by its opponent and it loses the war.
Can you give an example, like what kind of position?
Uh, well, in reality, you can think of it as a set of cities, right? A set of cities. You are disputing over a territory, and this territory has some cities that are more important than others. Like in a province, we say there are 8 cities. If you lose all of those 8 cities, then you lose the war. And your opponent takes the entire disputed territory.
Okay.
Right? And if you keep all those cities, then your opponent loses.
Okay. 比如
Okay.
说上海。
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, like Sino-Japanese War, then it is a set of big cities in China. Okay. And we assume there are n military positions, n is larger or equal to 2, and we use KT be the number of military positions achieved by player 1 at time t, okay? And we use K0 be the military position at the beginning of the game, okay? And that means if KT equals to n, player 1 obtains all military objectives, and player 1 receives the entire pie, and the game ends, as I said. And conversely, if KT equals to 0, player 1 is distracted, and player 2 receives pie. However, if KT is below 0 and n, fighting stalemate continues, and we assume that each side obtains a war payoff, which is BI, and that means player 1 receives B1, player 2 receives B2, and the sum of B1 and B2 must be smaller than pi because war is costly, right? War distracts some part of the pie. And if player 1 wins the battle in the period T, then KT plus 1 is KT plus 1, right? It obtains one more objective. And conversely, if it loses, then the military position in the next period is KT minus 1, right? KT here, minus 1. And we assume that player 1 wins the fight with probability P and loses the fight with probability 1 minus P. Okay. And whether he wins or loses the fight is determined by nature. Okay. How to solve this game? In this game, players play a kind of Markov strategy or Markov game. What does that mean? First of all, we can see it is a dynamic game, right? Players play not only in one period, but multiple periods, in infinite periods.
它是个人名还是
Markov 是个人名 ，it's a name.
就是以这个人为命名的。
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. players play in an infinite period. But if we think of dynamic games, we often think of perfect equilibrium, subgame perfect equilibrium, or Bayesian perfect equilibrium. And that means player strategy not only depends on the past, they care about the past, but also care about where they are at present. But Markov is different. Markov means players only care about their future payoffs, okay? What they will receive in the future. And when they make their decision, they only care about their state of the world in the current period. Okay, so past, that means past is past. We don't look at the past. The past only help us to update our beliefs of our opponent. It helps us to complete the incomplete information. It reviews information, but our strategy is not contingent on the past. We determine our strategy only on the state of the world. And also, we only care about the payoff from the future. Okay. Okay. So, to be specific, we can see that in his model, war is modeled as a stochastic process. Stochastic process means random process. It is the outcome is randomly determined by nature. Mhm. And in each period, player's action depends on the state of the world rather than the entire history. Okay, remember, depends on the state of the world in his model means depends on the military position that each country states in the current period. Okay. And when there is incomplete information, players update their beliefs and choose the best strategy according to the belief. And if they do so, then this equilibrium is Markov perfect equilibrium. And the key to solve this game is that in each period, the proposed offer must make the opponent be indifferent between accepting and fighting one more war. And this is obvious, right? When player one gives an offer to player two, it must make player two to be indifferent between reject or accept, right? And player one's offer is based on its belief about player two. And then the offer must be equal or larger than the expected war payoff. And as I said, war is a stochastic process, and war payoff is partially contingent on the state of the world KT. I will show that later. What does that mean? Okay, let's first see if there is complete information, which means player one knows the capability of player two also knows the capability of player one, okay? And we use KXK star to denote player one's offer to player two at military position K, okay? So let's first assume that those players are at military position one, which means at this moment, player one has only one city, okay? And this is the offer to player two, right? Pi minus x1 star, right? Here, pi minus x1 star. This is the offer to player two.
你 n 不是一定大于等于2吗？
Uh-huh.
那你为什么刚刚说先等于1？如果假设只有一个 city。
No, we assume this is the current military position. There are a set of military positions. And now at this stage, this is where player one states. Okay? So what I want to show you is that what offer player one will give to player two if it only achieves one military position. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And if that's the case, then as I said, this is the offer to player two, right? The offer to player two must be at least equal to the war payoff that player two can receive by fighting one more period.
Okay.
Right? And that means in this period, if player two fights, this is the payoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the next period, because there is fighting and war is a stochastic process, player one may lose one more objective. And this is the probability, right? 1 minus P is the probability that player one loses one more objective. And if player one loses one more objective, it means player one is totally distracted by player two, and player two will receive pi, right? And if this is one case, another case is player one wins one more objective, the probability is P. And then in the next period, the game moves on to the next period. Then player two will give an offer to player one, right? And the offer is this, is Y, right? So this is the offer that player one must provide to player two, right? It is the offer that player two can obtain by fighting one more round in this period, by fighting in this period. Okay. And if the current military position is x2 star, which means player one has achieved two objectives, then its offer to player two is this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we generalize this law or this function, we can see if player one is at K military position, then its offer to player two must be this. Right? Okay. Then this is player.
杜老师是不要说话。
Well, any question?
No, keep going. I was just trying to figure it out by myself, but you can keep going.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is player one's offer, and we can see that there are so many unknown variable because we only display half of the functions, half of the function complex, and there's another half. We also need to write out what is Y, right? What will be player two's offer to player one?
我刚刚就想问，为什么派就是下面变成了 y1，就是
这个吗？
为什么嘞？
And this is
我知道很蠢，但是
this is because now where is player one? It has achieved two objectives, right? And one possibility is that it loses one objective. Then that means it is what? It has only one objective left, right? It is the military position. It is player one's military position in the next period after a fight. And player two will give player one what? Will give player one Y one star, right?
OK，我忘了 y1 star 是什么意思来着。
Here. This is Y.
OK，懂了。Keep going. Sorry. 你讲到 y star yk star.
YK star.
OK.
That's the same. We follow the same logic. We can see that we can write out the offer of player two to player one, right? At each military position K. And similarly, if player one military position is Y, and then the offer of player two to player one must make player one indifferent between fighting and accepting. And if it fights, it will get this, right? If it fights, it will get this. And so if player two, if player one is at the military position of K, we can also write this. Okay, so what am I doing? I'm trying to figure out what will be player one's offer to player two once it is proposing. Okay, and at different military stage. And what will be their offer? And what will be player two's offer to player one if player two is proposing, depending on the military position, depending on the different military position, right? So we have two complex, functional complex. And then if we combine them together, we will get x1 star, x2 star, xk star. It's solvable. Right? Because you can see here how many unknown variable do we have. B is already known, P is already known, delta is already known. What is unknown is only Y and X and a different military position, right? And when they appear here in the first the functional complex, it also appears here, right? And Y also, you can see Y here and Y here. So if we have, let's just say if we have two military positions, N equals to 2, then we will have these two and these two. And you can see we have 1, 2, no, here will be pi. Here will be, because if we only have two objectives, there will not be 3, right? This will be pi, and this will also be pi. And we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 4 unknown variables, and we also have 4 functions, so it's solvable.
你不用理我 ，too complex to me。继续 keep going。
So what does this tells us? It tells us that if there is complete information, then there is a unique no delay Markov perfect equilibrium, in which player one's offer in t equals to 1 is immediately accepted by player 2. There will be no fighting, right? There will be no fighting. Okay, this is what it tells us. If there's complete information, basically it means before the game starts, each player knows what kind of cards they will play, right? They will know.
Assumption 吗？
No, it's not an assumption. I'm trying to intuitively explain
Okay.
the conclusion. It tells you that if there is complete information at the beginning of the game, each player has already known what card they will play, they themselves will play, and their opponent will play. Right? So there is no need to delay, because delay is costly, war is costly. They will just play the card sufficient to buy off their opponent at the beginning of the game. So there is no fighting. Okay?
这个高老师上过说过。
Yes. Okay, we come to the more complicated part. Let's assume there is incomplete information. So if player 1 is uncertain about player 2's military capability, okay, but player 2 knows its own capability. Player 1 is unknown about player 2's capability. And we suppose that there are 3 possible types. We use tau to denote the type of player 2. And there are 3 types: weak type player 2, QW, medium type player 2, 2M, and strong type player 2, 2S. And the corresponding probability of player 1 winning the fight when it confronts different type of player 2 is high, medium, and L. Okay, it means if player 1 is confronting a weak type player 2, the probability of it winning the fight is high and it's medium. If the opponent is strong, then the probability of winning the war is low. And we use QT tall to denote player 1's prior belief in period T that player 2 is of tall type. What does that mean? At the beginning of each period, after you have seen all the history, right, you will update your belief and you will have a prior belief before starting to play in this period. Okay? We use QT tall to denote player 1's prior belief that player 2 is of tall type. So if it's QTS, it means player 1's belief, QTS. I'm giving you an example, QTS.
Okay.
It means player 1's prior belief in period T that its opponent is of strong type. Okay? And how do player 1 update its belief? It updates its belief using Bayesian theory. And we use IT to be an indicator that equals 1 if player 1 wins the battle at time T. And if player 1 loses the battle, then IT equals 0. Okay? First, let's review what is Bayesian theorem. Okay, that is important.
没别的。小学生课堂开课了，看得见吗
看得见，看得见。
？OK，
被田老师的那个双开门打
重点跑偏了，完蛋。
Okay, so this is Bayesian theorem. 我这个数是应该给它
Gosh，
能看到。
能看到。
能看到。OK，
但是你录屏的话，你看一下你给 Judy 录的是你的现在展示的这个还是这个屏？
他在录吗？你在
在录，它应该两个都会录。
OK，
Okay, so what does this say? H is hypothesis,
嗯
and E means evidence.
嗯
So Bayesian theorem tells us that given the evidence, when you see the evidence, you update your hypothesis.
嗯
For example, in this example, when you see player 1 or player 2 wins a battle, you will update your hypothesis of whether the probability of player 1 is a weak type. You will also update your hypothesis that player 2 is of medium type and is of strong type.
嗯
Okay?
Okay.
And how do you update? So when you see the evidence, and you will think that it is the probability that your hypothesis is true times, given the hypothesis, you see the evidence. Okay, let's first assume that we are trying to update the probability of player 2 is of strong type, given that player 2 has won the war in the last period, or in this period. Okay, so it is what? It is that the probability that player 2 is really of S type
嗯
times, given that player 2 is of S type, you see that it wins, the probability that you see it wins a war.
OK，
Okay. And however, even if player 2 is not of S type, for example, it is a weak type and medium type, there are some chances for you to see that player 2 wins the war, right? Weak type may also win the war by chance, right? So what is that probability? That probability is this. So it is the probability that your hypothesis is wrong times, given your hypothesis is wrong, that you see this evidence, right? So in this case, it means the probability that player 2 is a weak type times, if it is a weak type, it still wins the war, plus the probability it is of strong medium type times it is of medium type, and it still wins the war, plus
strong type.
it is strong type, and the probability that it wins the war. Right? So this is the probability. Basically, this is the probability you see this evidence. Okay? And we call this prior belief. We call this prior belief. This PH is prior belief. Okay? And this is the posterior belief. Posterior belief. Which is likelihood? I forgot. This is likelihood or this is likelihood? I forgot. I think this is likelihood. But anyway, I don't think likelihood doesn't really matter. Yeah. What it really matters in our in this model is you should know what is prior and what is posterior. How does he update? Okay. So to generalize this, we can write it into this function. Given the evidence that you see player 2 wins or loses the war, and you update your belief about player 2's type, and it equals to this, right? This is what I wrote.
Okay.
This is the way that player 1 gradually updates player 2's updates his belief about player 2's type. So if let's just make an example. If you believe that your opponent is very weak, that means if the probability of your opponent being medium and strong is very slow, it's very small. Okay, this is your prior belief, and you see your opponent wins the war, which is very surprising, then Bayesian will help you to significantly increase the probability of the medium and strong type, yes, and decrease the weak type, yeah. And usually states will first assume your opponent is weak, right? Your opponent is weak, and that's why you started war. And by fighting, your opponent wins once and once again. You find them, in fact, medium or strong, not that weak as you imagined.
有没有可能会出错呢？不会。
How to make
就比如
mistake?
说你在一次战争之后，你可能就是 strong 上来了，weak 下去了。
Yes, it's possible.
但是没有办法，就是在一次战争之后马上检验它，对吧？必须得最好就是再进行多次。
No, the problem is usually one fight is inefficient to achieve the right belief or the real probability. Usually they will fight multiple battles. And if your opponent is really weak, it's very unlikely they will win multiple.
But in reality, 那我得打好几次我才能。
Yes. countries will not just fight one time. They will fight multiple times.
OK，
You
我
see,
我
it
大
it
我
doesn't
明白，
need to be a war. You
就是
see,
conflict。
multiple conflicts, multiple battles.
OK OK
Mm.
OK OK，
And if you believe your opponent is weak and he only won the last war by chance, then you will keep fighting, right? You will also keep fighting to try it. Right? Okay, so now we need to prove the principle of convergence, the core of this model. We need to show the case that player two is of strong type. And why? Because if player two is a weak type, then in the first period, player one will buy off the weak type, right? In the first beginning of the period, player one will always make a very small offer, but that offer should be sufficient to buy off the weak type, isn't it? It is very unlikely for player one to buy off a medium type or strong type at the beginning, because what if your opponent is weak, right? He will only buy off a weak type opponent. So in order to show the principle of convergence, we need to extend this period. And that's why we assume that player two is a strong type. We want to extend the period to show the game.
OK，
And in each period, the proposed offer must make the rival indifferent between accepting and fighting. So this is the same, given the proposer's belief. However, because of informational asymmetry, the offer may not be sufficient to buy off the rival, and that will lead to a fight, right? And we use a 3-period game to show how player one gradually rules out the weak type player two and medium type player two. Okay. So we use backward induction. That means we start from period two, right? There are 3 periods: period 0, period 1, and period 2. I think I can still show it. At the beginning of the game, it is player 1 giving an offer, and then player 2 gives an offer, and in period t equals to 2, player 1 gives an offer. Okay? And in here, in this period, player 1 gives an offer and we assume to realize the state of war is K2. And in this period, t equals to 2, player 1 has ruled out weak and medium type player 2, right? In the previous fights, we have ruled out. So there is only one type left, which is strong type, right? And so this game becomes a complete information game. And this game will end in this period.
Complete.
Right? As we have shown in previous slides. And the payoff is contingent on the state of the warp K2. Can you see why?
No， 来看。
Can you see why, 杜老师？So I said we are now in t equals to 2. 我们在 t 等于2这个 period. And this period, player 1 has a certain that his opponent is a strong type, right? Because in t equals to 0 and equals to 1, we have ruled out other types of player 2. There is only one type left. There is only a strong type. And that's why I say the game of t equals to 2 is a complete information game. Right? And the game will end right in this period. And the offer of player 1 to player 2 is contingent on the state of the war, where how many objectives have player 1 achieved and have player 2 achieved, right? As I shown here.
但我把你的画面锁定了，导致我现在看不到那个分享的那个屏幕了。等一下，
就是因为我在这个 complete information 这里给大家展示的就是，当你有 complete information 的话，你player one 他处在不同的这个 military position 的时候，他会给 player two 一个什么样的 offer，对吧？然后所以我说现在即便是有 incomplete information，但是到了最后一个阶段，这个 game 已经变成了 complete information 了。那么 player one 给 player two 的 offer 是不是就取决于在最后这个阶段开始的时候，他们是处在一个什么 military position，对吧？
但是脑子有点没绕过来，为什么到这个阶段它就是 complete implement？
Because player one have ruled out other types. For example, in period
two 的 type 已经
ruled out 了。
OK
哦，
OK，那我懂。但是你说 t 等于2的时候就可以入到，那不是其实也没几个回合。
但是你一个回合在现实中可以是非常长的。
哎，
它并不是说一个回合就一定是一个 battle 或者是一个什么什么
是
东西，
对 OK，
它这一个回合是可能是非常长。
OK，
杜老师懂了吗
OK，
？OK，
他应该懂了吧？我才是最不懂的那一个。
没有，我现在还在有一个工作，但是那个田老师反正录视频了嘛，
OK，可以可以
回看。我一会儿可能得先撤。
，OK，好，没问题。然后接下来 next，in we I said we do it in backward induction, and now let's move on to period one. And in this period, player two makes an offer, and realize the state of the world is K1, right? And in this period, player one has ruled out weak type player two, right? And we use Q1W equals to 0, means in period one, player one's belief that player two is a weak type is 0. And is of strong type is 1 minus 1 Q1M, right? There are only two types left, strong and medium. So strong type is 1 minus the probability of being medium. And if there is a fight, the probability of player one winning the fight is what? There are some probability that player one is of strong type. And if player one is of strong type, then the probability of winning the war is PL is low. And if it's a medium type, right, this is probability of being medium type. And the medium type, yes. So this is the overall probability of player one winning the war if the war occurs in this period, right?
OK，
And given the belief and the state of the world, the smallest offer player one can accept is what? Remember, in this period is player two giving an offer to player one, right? So this offer must make player one indifferent between accept and reject. And you see, this is player two's offer to player one, right? This is player two's offer to player one. It equals to, if player one fights in this period, then it will receive B1. This is a fight payoff. And in the next period, there is P1 probability that player one wins the war, right? And then the payoff of player one is VS1 K1 plus 1. What does that mean? Remember, we are in period T equals to 1. And in the next period, it is complete information game. So the payoff we use V to denote because it's fixed,
OK，
right? And it is contingent on the military position of player one in the next period,
OK，
right? And there are some probability that player one loses the war, and we times it the payoff. It is weighted with the payoff that player one receives in the next period. So the overall message here is at the left side of the equation, it is the payoff of player two to player one, and it should equal to the payoff that player one can receive by fighting. And because there's fighting in this period, player one will only receive B1. The next period, there are some probability that player one wins the battle. Then this will be his future payoff. And some probability that player one loses the battle, and this is his future payoff.
OK，
Okay. But however, given the incomplete information, a strong type player two can obtain a higher payoff from fighting one more period. What will be his payoff from fighting one more period? This is his payoff from fighting. Fighting gives him, in this period, player two, if it fights, it receives this. And there are, in the next period, and this is his payoff in the next period. Because as I said, in the next period, player two and player one will play a complete information game, right? So this part is what player two will give to player one in the next period. It is the probability, because player two is a strong type, right? So there are some probability that player two wins the war, and this is what it will give to player one. And if it loses, this is what player one will receive. And the sum of them is what player one will receive in the next period. And we use pi minus this is what player two will receive in t equals to 2. Right. Okay, so this is player two's war payoff in t equals to 2. We are considering about next period.
One more thing.
Okay, so at the right of this function, it is the payoff of player two from fighting one more battle, from fighting in this period.
Yeah.
And what if the payoff of giving player one this offer is smaller than the payoff B can obtain by fighting? In that case, B will fight, right? It means here, it means you must give player one this payoff. This is the smallest, okay? However, the smallest, this is the smallest A must receive. And if this is the smallest, this is the largest, right? This is the largest payoff player two can receive in t equals to 1. But this payoff is still smaller than that from fighting. The largest payoff from settlement is still smaller than fighting payoff.
也就是说，他不管怎么样，打一仗总是更 benefit。
对，如果要是这个等式成立的话，这个不等式成立的话，那么是不是它就会 fight？
OK，
对吧？那么 in this case 把这个 solve 了之后，我们就得到了这个。
OK，
这个解出来就得到了这个。那么这里we get a lemma 1 and we let delta q as 1 underline be the smallest discount factor that solves 8. for some Q1s. And whenever delta is larger than that, and player S2 strictly prefers to make an, this is an unacceptable offer in period t equals to 1。
也就是说，如果这个等式不成立的话，它可能就不会再打多一轮。
对，因为它如果要不成立的话，我能通过 settlement 得到的 payoff 要大于 war payoff，那他当然就不会去 fight 了。
OK，
对吧？而如果要是出 if there exists such delta that this formula holds, then player 2 will strictly prefer to fighting. And if it strictly prefers to fighting, you will make an unacceptable offer, right? Unacceptable offer in period t equals to 1. You may demand a lot to player 1. Okay, so this is period t equals to 1, and still backward induction. In period t equals to 0，
为什么要倒着说呀？
因为你想解这样的这种 dynamic game 就一定是要 backward， 你要先考虑到最后的话，然后我前面这一步他会怎么做，我会怎么做，再前面一步他会怎么做，我会怎么做，然后才能决定我现在在最一开始要做什
么。哇，
那
一般是从第3步开始吗？第3步
跟那个没什么关系，跟这个没有关系。
接着说吧。
So in period t equals to 0, and there where player 1 makes an offer, okay, and the realized state of word is k0. We look for the condition where player 1 only buys off weak type player 2. Okay, so we are trying to tell a story. In the first period, player 1 only buys off weak type player 2, and in the next period, player 2 finds it more beneficial to fight. And in the last period, player 1 it becomes a complete information game, and player 1 believes its opponent is a strong type. Okay, and now
only strong type 吗？
Only strong type.
Medium no.
Medium 已经在第2个阶段给 rule out， 对吧？因为我们在这儿 ，you can see we consider the probability that it is a medium. And we use P0 denote the probability that player 1 wins the fight if player 2 rejects the offer. And the probability is this. If player 2 rejects the offer, we know player 2 must be either a weak type, either a medium type or a strong type, right? Because I will buy off weak type player 2. A weak type player 2 will accept. But now it rejects the offer. It is either medium or strong type. So in that case, if there is such a fight, the probability of player 1 wins the fight is this, right? For medium type winning, this is the probability. For strong type winning, this is the probability. And the opponent is either medium or strong type. So this is the probability of player 1 winning the fight. And if player 1 only buys off weak type player 2, then we know player 1's offer should be what? Should be sufficient to let player 2 be indifferent between fighting and accepting. Then its offer must be equal to the payoff, to player 2's fighting payoff, right? And what is fighting payoff? In this period, it receives this. And in the following periods, player 2 will give what? Player 2 will give an offer, right? And this is the Q1 S1. It means after seeing player 2 winning this fight in period 0, t equals 0, this is player 1's updated belief. and this is their military position. So they are carrying this belief and the military position to the next period, right? And this will be the offer for the next period, right? In the next period, player 2 will receive Y. Even the belief and the military position, this will be the payoff of player 2 in the next period. And what will be the probability that
你可以先解释一下为什么 only by 你做 only by a two weak type 为什么 one 的 offer 是什么 ？Player one 的 offer 是什么？
player 1的 offer 就是这个，能够让它变得 indifferent between 这个和这个。
这个和这个是什么？
OK，player 1的 offer 就应该让它的 offer 就应该等于 player 2这个 period 的 fight 能够得到的 payoff。
就是 period one 还是 period zero
zero
得
你给他一个 offer，什么样的情况下 peer state to accept 等于的是他 reject， 也就是说有一个 fight
OK
得到的 offer。如果要是这块的 payoff 和这儿的 payoff 是相等的话，那么 player 2不就是会 accept
吗？懂了。再下一页，对，这讲到2里。
然后的话呢，这块就是它的这个 payoff 嘛，就是 offer， 对，这个 player 1给 player 2的 offer 就应该是等于这个。
对，
因为我现在只 buy off weak type 吧，那么我就会，那么在这一个阶段，我认为它能够获胜的可能性是不是就是 high 的？对吧？然后这个输的可能性就是1 minus pH，然后输的话就是0，主要是 K0减1，对吧？然后这个是1给2的 offer 吧，对吧？那么如果给了这个 offer，what is its corresponding payoff from this offer? What is player 1's payoff from giving this offer? It is this. First, this is what player 1 receive, right? X0 star. There are some probability that weak type player 2 will accept this offer. And what is the probability? Remember, we only buy off weak type player 2. So the probability is the probability of player 2 be of weak type. Right? This is the probability of player 2 accepting the offer times the payoff from player 2 accepting the offer. Now, what if player 2 does not accept this offer? What is the probability? Then it means player 2 is not of weak type. It's this. Times, then there will be a fight. If there is a fight, player 1 receives this, plus what is the probability of player 1 winning this fight is this, right? And losing the fight is this. And in the next period, this is what player 1 will receive, right? And if it wins and if it loses. So this overall, the sum of them is player one's corresponding payoff from only buying off weak type player two. And if it is an equilibrium, if it is an equilibrium, we need to show that it is more beneficial than buying off both weak type and medium type, and it is also more beneficial than buying off all three types of player two.
Why?
Because if it is less beneficial, then you will deviate to either buying off all three types of player two, or deviate to buying off weak and medium type. So very similar. If player one buys off weak and medium type, he just need to pay the give the offer sufficient to buy off medium type, right? Because weak type will automatically accept. And we use x0 hat to denote this offer. This offer equals to this, right? It's very similar. It must be equal to player two's fighting payoff from the current period and from the next period if it is a medium type, and if it wins. If it is not, if it loses, and the payoff from losing. And this will be player one's payoff from buying off these two types. It is the probability that being a weak or medium times the payoff, and if it is not, then it will receive this. It means it is a strong type, right? And the third case is that it buys off all types of player two, so it buys off strong type. The offer for strong type will be sufficient, and this offer and its payoff will become this. To establish the equilibrium, player one only buys off weak type player two. It means this x star, the payoff from only buying off weak type player two is larger than buying off two types, and is also larger than buying off all three types. And we solve it. And we let 0 delta underline be the smallest discount factor that solves this. And whenever a delta is larger than this, player one strictly prefers to a separating strategy, only buying off weak type player two in the first period. And finally, we'll come to the proposition. And if there exists some delta such that it satisfies lemma one, still remember lemma one?
No.
Here.
Okay.
Lemma one and satisfies lemma two, then there exists such cases that player one will separate weak type player two in period t equals 0, and player two will provide an unacceptable offer in t equals to 1, and player one will provide an offer to buy off strong type player two in t equals to 2. And this is a model.
也就是说，咱们就是说，第一 period 就0 period 就可以辨别出来，它是不是？
对，如果要是存在这样的 delta 的话，我们就会对于 player one 来说，它在第一个 period t equals to 0的时候，它只筛出
只能
weak
剥
type，
离了是不是 weak？
对，只剥离 weak type，就是更 beneficial 的。所以说它就会只剥离 weak type，然后等到下一个 period player two 不是 give an offer 吗？对于 player two 来说，他如果要是fight 要比 accept 更加的 beneficial，所以说他会给一个 unacceptable 的 offer，让 player one 不去接受它，
然后就得到更多的 beneficial。
对，
懂了。
所以说
回到你的大问题，
在这个过程中，
为什么更多是 agreement settlement，而不是？那回到大问题的话，怎么解释？
他在这里就是想证明，就是这个 convergence process，在一开始的话，我们是有那个什么来着？我们是不清楚，我们不清楚到底是哪一个 type，所以说我们不断的在提高我们这个 offer，然后我给，等到我们的这个 converge 了，也就是到第3个阶段变成 complete information 了。那么你的 offer 是不是取决于你所处在的那个 military position，而没有说在第3个阶段就 totally distract，对吧？你给一个 offer，根据你的 military position 以及你对手的这个 type，然后的话呢，你给他一个 offer，然后你们俩结束，而没有这个 total distraction。
我觉得这个你要放在解释，难说，我也不太懂它的 empirical 是什么。就是你解释为什么南北朝战争现在还是一个处于完全没有解除的状态，但它现在是停战的状态，你这个怎么解释？
他这里没有，他没有提供一个 empirical case。
那你觉得他解释力怎么样？
我觉得啊，他说的这个有道理，但是说真的，就咱们只说它的 model 的话，你会看到它这里有非常多的 unknown，这个它并没有真正的去解这个 model，到底这个存不存在？
而且它是倒着算的，我就觉得
不一定要倒着算。
我知道我的意思是，就如果你要套到现实生活中的话，你也是倒着算吗？是。
会的，我觉得会的。这个我 backward induction 倒没有，我只是会觉得它这里，你看到它这里不是难解的问题，是解不了，是不可解的。
OK，
它有大量的信息是在不可解的东西里，
而且它这个是，
而且它最后的落脚点是，如果存在这样的 delta，它满足了这个的什么什么东西的话，然后这个什么东西呢？你就看 lemma one，我觉得比较清楚。lemma one 就是说啊，我们让 有一个 delta，然后使得这个不等式成立的最小的 delta，然后这样所有 delta 大于它的话，都会使这个不等式恒成立嘛，对吧？然后他的意思就是，只要存在这样的 delta，它就恒成立，他们就一定会干什么？但是谁知道是不是存在呢？这些都是不可解的，都是不可解的。
我买一半，败一半，你可以结束录屏。
OK，复杂吗？
主要是我有个悄悄话想说。
嗯，
他们也在吗？
我看一下。